Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Marge On Live. My name is Siobhan, and I'm going to be producing the session for you today. And this session is focused on disability support. So we're joined by Anne and Lynn, who are from our Disability and Inclusion Advice Service at Marge On, and they're going to be doing the presentation first. And we've also got two student ambassadors with us today, so that's Seren and Laura, and they're going to give us a bit of information and insight into student life at Marge On. So, okay, I'm going to hand over now to you, Lynn. Thank you.
Thanks, Siobhan. Hello and welcome to everybody. Welcome to this live talk. As Siobhan said, this is disability support at Marge On. Hopefully it will start to answer some of the questions that you might have about how things might work and how you might be supported. But as Siobhan was saying there, you can ask us questions here during the live, and our contact details will be on some of the slides as we go through. So you'll have access to both our telephone number and email address. So you can contact us if you'd rather ask more personal questions. And to introduce myself properly then, I'm Linda Tout. I'm the Inclusion Coordinator and I manage the Disability and Inclusion Advice Service. And Anne Lewis, who's with me today, is the Senior Disability Advisor. So as Siobhan said, we're here to take you through some of the aspects of disability support. But obviously today is a summary, so you may have more detailed questions. So, come and speak to us. Really, that's the best way to get more detailed information, because we'll only be able to summarise some of the main points. Okay, so moving into sort of what our team looks like. We're quite a small university, as I'm sure you're already aware. But actually, we've got a really large team that do disability and inclusion support. So I wanted just to introduce that fact and just reassure you that we're a large team. You're not going to get different support at our university because we're smaller. You're going to get more sort of, knowledgeable members of the team, because we actually have a student population with very high numbers of disability. So within our undergraduate population, for example, around about 24% of students are registered and being supported with our team. So that's built up an awful lot of knowledge. Obviously, your condition, your disability is very unique to you, and we'll work with you to make sure that you get the right support. But just running through who's in our team and how we can support you. Myself, I look after more sort of inclusion-wide issues, so covering all of the protected characteristics of age, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion and belief, and so forth. But the rest of the team are very much disability focused. So Anne and Nikki are our two disability advisors, and they're there really to advise you from the get-go, sort of how to apply for disabled student allowance, how to register with the team, what support you might want to apply for, what's available to you. But also later on through the process, if you come up against barriers and issues with your academic support because of your disability or health condition, coming back to them and asking them for advice and help. We also have a team of both specialist mentors and specialist tutors, and these are staff that work one-to-one with students with particular difficulties. So our mentors tend to work with students who have a mental ill health condition diagnosis, so something like depression or anxiety, or one of the more detailed kind of diagnoses. And our specialist tutors work one-to-one, mostly with students who have specific learning difficulties like dyslexia. Both the mentors and the tutors also work with students who have one of the sort of autistic spectrum conditions like autism or Asperger's. And our study assistants are a small team of staff. They work with a fairly small percentage of students across the campus, where a little bit more sort of one-to-one support is needed out and about on the campus. So whether that's in lectures or in library, or really just across the whole campus. So they will support students in terms of mobility needs, in terms of carrying, and all sorts of other things as well. But they're a fairly small team as well. So altogether, that makes 25 of us. As I say, quite a large team for a small university. We sit within the larger student support team, so that means that we can easily liaise with student funding and academic support and other things that are kind of contained within the umbrella of student support. As I've mentioned, because we have lots of students registered with our team, that does mean that we do have a lot of experience, and we can usually come up with creative ways of how things can work for you if you're particularly worried about something, some aspect of learning. So that's us really in a nutshell. Probably what you'll need to know next is around who might be eligible. So am I eligible for my condition? And what would that mean in, you know, if I have dyslexia, what would I get? If I have depression, what support can I expect? So I'm going to be handing over to my colleague Anne now, and she's going to take you through the eligibility and what actually you can expect. So over to you, Anne. Thank you.
Hi, as Lynn said earlier, I'm Anne Lewis. I am one of the disability advisors here at Marjan. So who do we support here on the DIAS team at Marjan? Any student who has a learning difficulty, including dyslexia, dyspraxia or dyscalculia. You may have a mental health condition, so that could be anything from anxiety, depression, OCD, eating disorders, borderline personality disorder, anything on the mental health spectrum. Autistic spectrum disorder. You may have an individual diagnosis for Asperger's or autism, or related conditions such as ADHD. You might have a health condition, including diagnosis for cancer or IBS, Crohn's, colitis, celiac, etc. Or an invisible disability such as ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, or a brain injury. You might have a physical disability such as cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, and we also support students with visual impairment and hearing impairment. So the support available will depend entirely on what your needs or your disability or condition are. So here at the university we can support you with exam arrangements. That could be additional time, suitable room or rest breaks, study assistance or one-to-one support. So you might need support with carrying bags around the university and from room to room, note-taking support or opening some doors that are heavy and not electronic, or enlarging text on a handout, or on rare occasions body type support. Alternative assessments. Perhaps if you had 100% additional time for an exam and you had a 4-hour exam, then that would mean you'd have to sit 8 hours for an exam, and that's not going to be good use of your time really. So we could negotiate with your tutor to make sure that all the learning outcomes could be met, to see if you can do an alternative assessment such as an essay. We have an inclusive library and they're really supportive. They offer generic study skills, they can do one-to-one library inductions, they can put books back for you to collect at a later date or a later time, and they offer electronic books, which is really useful during this time, and lockers where you can store books or bags or whatever. So funding bodies. There are different funding bodies. Most of our students here at Marjan are with Student Finance England, but you might be with Student Finance Wales, you might be with SAS from Scotland, Guernsey, Jersey, Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, Falkland Islands. There's a range of funding bodies. Each funding body offers different support, so it's really important that you get in touch with us on an individual basis, and again we'll show you our email address later on in one of the slides. The typical types of support that you can get from the funding body are things like one-to-one specialist study skills support, one-to-one specialist mentoring support, ergonomic equipment such as chairs, tables, bags, etc., computer equipment and specialised software, and assistive technology training. It's no good giving you specialised software if they're not going to train you on how to use it, so it's really important that you would take that up. And we also sometimes have taxi travel. So I'll pass you over back to Lynn.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks for that. I think that's really useful. So it won't have escaped you then that we're known as DIAS, Disability and Inclusion Advice Service, but if somebody says disability team or disability service, that's who they're referring to. So just to confirm that really. I think we're certainly giving the message today that if you are coming to us in September, get yourself ready and contact us as soon as possible. So just a reminder then that our email address is disability@marjan.act.uk, And our telephone number is a Plymouth number 01752 for the code, and then it's 636833. And you contact us in whichever way is, the best for you. So if you're someone who doesn't like to use the telephone, you can email us and we will electronically come back and forth to you. But if you prefer to have a telephone call with us or even a video call with us, just let us know that when you email or when you phone. So do get in touch. I think probably the other thing to mention is a lot of prospective students think we're about to shut down for the summer. If only. We actually work all year round. So of course we take holiday, but one of the team will be available all year round. So if you contact us in July, if you contact us in August, you will get a response. So just to remind you of that, so don't think, oh, well, it's too late now, I won't contact them until September. Do contact us as soon as possible. And mostly, obviously, through the summer months, we are working with prospective students, advising them, helping them to gain evidence, advising them on how to make an application to your funding body. So as Anne said there, that, you may not even know who your funding body is, but she or Nikki will be able to advise you on that. And then, the best way to approach your funding body, what evidence you might need for that funding body, what's going to be acceptable, and then what happens next, because it's not, unfortunately, just a case of making an application, gaining the evidence, and then sending it off. There are some interim kind of processes. You'd be asked, for example, to have a study needs assessment. And right now, those are remote assessments that can still be done while people are working remotely. So that all starts to sound very confusing when you start to understand what hoops you have to jump through to get funding from your funding body for disability support. But that's what we're here for. Keep coming back and asking us if we're not quite sure what happens next. That's what we're for. We know what happens next with all of the funding bodies. We know what's acceptable for them and what they expect from you. So keep coming back and asking us, for wherever you are in the process. And the other thing I think is probably worth mentioning now is you may or may not be thinking about coming to Marjon this September. If you're definitely thinking about coming to Marjon in September, get in touch now. If you're not sure whether you're going to come in September or not, you can still contact us. The advice we give you will be relevant across all universities. So making an application to your funding body for disability support isn't going to change depending on which offer you end up going with. And obviously if you do know you're coming in September, then some of the stuff that you can get in place now means that we're all ready to go in September and support you. We can do things like exam arrangements far in advance, so you don't get to your exam. First exams are usually either November or January, so don't get to that point and think, what do I do? I'm supposed to have some extra time. We can do all of that in advance, so that there's no worry and concern and extra stress kind of added to the process. So the other things that Anne and Nikki can do, because it sounds very much from what I'm saying that they're only there at the beginning of getting help and your DSA in place, but actually they can be there right the way through. So they advise your lecturers. If you're happy for us to talk to your lecturers, they can advise teaching staff on what perhaps they could do in terms of their teaching. So for example, if you're somebody who lip reads and you're concerned about how that will work, then you can ask us to intervene on your behalf if you want to, and speak to your teaching staff and make it clear what you will actually need when you're in a lecture face to face. So we're not just there for the beginnings, we're there all the way through. And the other thing to mention is we've had some contact from students who have quite complex health conditions and who aren't starting until next year. And that's okay as well. You can come and speak to us whenever you want to. And as far as the complex conditions are concerned, if you're going to have particular accommodation needs, for example, then it's the earlier the better. Come and contact us sooner rather than later. So I think that's probably about it. What we've tried to do really is just cover some of the main points today and just summarize those for you. but not overload you with information so that you don't know which way to turn and you get confused about all of the different hoops you have to jump through. So I think we'll stop talking at this point. Remind you for a last time, contact us sooner rather than later. Our contact details again are there. And just see now if there have been some questions that we can answer. So if I pass back over to Siobhan and she can manage the question and answer session for us. And thank you for listening.
Hi Lynn, that's great, thank you. So we've got a couple of questions here, and the first one I think I'm going to come over to our student ambassadors. So I'm going to come to you first, Laura, and then to you, Seren. How approachable would you say that the wider student support team are?
I think that you definitely benefit at Marjon from being in a smaller university, but having almost like a big student support team. From speaking to other people, other universities don't have anywhere near the support that we do and like the number of staff available. And also student support are really good at listening to what the students want. So they recently had a new desk put in because although there were drop-ins available, for some people they just felt the need for that face-to-face point of contact whenever they needed it and as soon as they needed it. So student support listened to that, and just before everything went into lockdown, that was all put into place. But since lockdown has happened, the whole of the student support team have been amazing at moving online and adapting everything that they can so that they're still there and there's still that presence for us that we know and kind of rely on.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to come over to you now, Seren.
I'd say sort of similarly, having a small university but lots of student support is really beneficial, and it is really easy to access, and there's lots of different places in the university sort of who you can ask and they'll point you in the direction of student support. You know, your lecturers will say, oh, these guys can help, or if you don't really know or understand what fits in under student support, they're there and able to say that they'll sort it out for you. And so that's really helpful, just to be able to sort of understand what they can do for you and then be able to access them easily and have that signposted for you.
Thank you, Seren. The next question we've got, I'm going to come over to you, Anne, I think. If I apply for disabled students allowance, how long will it take to have the support in place?
I'm really pleased that that question's come up because it does take quite a long time from start to finish to get your DSA in place. It can take up to 3 months from putting in your application to actually receiving your equipment and support. So it's really, really important that you apply early. In some cases, depending on your funding body, it's quicker than 3 months, but the best thing to do is to apply early, get your medical evidence or your educational psychology assessment, apply to Student Finance England or to your funding body, whichever funding body, and get that going really quickly, because you want to be in September with everything in place so that you can start on the right footing, really.
That's fab, thank you, Anne. And there's another question here which might be a suitable one for you. Where can I get medical evidence from at the moment? So is the process any kind of different at the moment than it would be normally? And what evidence am I likely to need?
Okay, so the funding bodies, so if you have a specific learning difficulty, for example, then you would need an educational psychology report, which you may already have. So again, get in touch with us and we can tell you whether your report is still eligible, and if it's not, how you would update it or whatever. If you had something like Asperger's or autism, you might have a clinical psychology report, so that again might be, you can still use that one. Most students for medical conditions or disabilities use the Student Finance England medical evidence form, but if your funding body asks for a letter, we can tell you how to word that letter, because there's a statement that your doctor must put in that evidence which meets the Equality Act to say that you're eligible for that type of support, that you have a disability or a long-term condition which is generally over 1 year. But the medical evidence form from Student Finance England has the statement written on it, and it would just mean the GPs generally like this form because it's easy to fill in, it's quick. Some GPs will charge you for it, but it is, not, hopefully not very much, and the form is quick and easy to fill in. So in these, at the moment, the GP surgeries are still open, so they're still taking we're still getting students to get medical evidence forms from their GP. They maybe have to do it in a different way. They may have to attach the form to an email to their GP and just ask them to complete it. But as I say, these forms are really easy to fill in, so doctors don't mind them really. So yeah, but any questions or queries, please, we keep reiterating in this, but it is so important. If you get in touch with us, we can guide you on every little step of the way if you're stuck on something. So then that will make sure that the process runs more smoothly and you get your support ready for September.
Siobhan, can I just come in on that as well?
Yeah, sure, Lynn, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in terms of evidence, I've heard from some GP surgeries that if you're sort of 18 or 19, they won't charge you. So even more reason to get in quickly to your GP and get some evidence, particularly if you're coming up to a birthday. So that might be helpful. But on the earlier question around the length of time it takes to make an application for funded support, the 3 months, yeah, it does sound really scary. It does sound like, actually, because we're already in July now, that might be, you know, October before you get support in. So I just wanted to come in with some university funded support that we do give. If you have evidence of dyslexia that is suitable for your funding body and you're just waiting for them to actually confirm that you're entitled to support, we're able to put in some interim support for you. So we can do that. So you wouldn't necessarily have to wait that long for the support, so long as you have the evidence. And it would work in a similar way as well if for example, you have a mental health condition, you've got evidence of that, but you're still, you know, you're still waiting for your funding body to come back and confirm that you can have support. We can generally put a one-to-one mentor in place for you as an interim until your funding body sort of catch up, if you like. So again, I think that's just another reason really to not only get the process started quickly, but to get your evidence and to start sharing that with us, so that we as a university can support you above and beyond what your, you know, before your funding body even sort of steps in. So just wanted to add that really, in case anybody's thinking 3 months, oh my goodness, that's a long time and I'm not going to get support when I first go to uni. We can help you with that. So please, you know, don't be worrying about that.
That's brilliant, thank you. We just had another question that's come into the Q&A. If I've already had my DSA assessment, what's the next step?
Okay, so if you've had your study needs assessment, then you'll be waiting for the assessor or the company that you had the assessment with to send you a copy of that report. They should also send the university, so if you're coming to us, they'll send us a copy of that report, and they'll also send a copy of that report to the funding body. So if it's Student Finance England, they'll get the report, then they work on that report, and then from there they'll send you what we call the DSA2 letter, which details down all the support that you're going to be entitled to. So in the report is just the recommendations, and in the DSA2 letter is what you're going to actually be awarded. So you need to cross-check to just see if anything's missed out. And it will start off by saying what your equipment and software is going to be on the top line, and then any contribution you have to make. So for Student Finance England, if you get a laptop, you have to pay a £200 contribution towards it. And then it will say who the rest that Student Finance England are going to pay. You then have to get in touch with the supplier and then negotiate the delivery date, etc. of your equipment and make the payment of the £200. And if you're going to negotiate to upgrade your equipment in any way, then you would pay that in addition as well if you decide to do that. Next on the list would be any non-medical helper support that you've been allocated. So if you've been allocated study skills or mentoring, and again it will tell you who the supplier is for that. We hope that it's going to be with us, but sometimes it's with an outside agency, which again is fine because these are all professional people who will look after you. If it's us, we get a copy of the DSA2 letter, and then we will write to you to say that who you're going to be allocated to for your study skills or mentoring, whatever is going to be awarded. And again, if you're with an agency, you'd need to contact them. The next thing would be if you've got anything additional, so that might be, you might have general allowances for paper or ink or something, and you can claim that back. And then the next thing would be if you've got any taxi travel or anything like that. So yes, it's the report, then a DSA2 letter, and arranging your support.